week 4 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units. I look to start the first one, the Philadelphia Eagles. And we had that patented ball game in week 3 at Tampa Bay where they pretty much shut down that offense for the first 3 quarters of the game. And we know this defensive line is one of the best D lines in the league. We know the secondary is obviously solid with Slay and Bradbury over there at corner. And the first couple weeks here for Philly, week 1 in New England, 20 points allowed, 2 sacks, and then throw a fumble recovery touchdown. Week 2 versus Minnesota, 28 points allowed, 2 sacks, 3 fumble recoveries. And week 3 at Tampa, like I said, they held them down and made some big plays. 11 points allowed, 2 sacks, and into a fumble recovery and a safety. So this week here, great matchup versus the Washington Commanders, division rival in the NFC East. The most turnover-prone offenses in the league here is this Washington Commander team, and they give up the second most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So right now, their offensive line isn't good at all, is this Commander team. Sam Howell's been a turnover machine so far in the early going, and I think this Philadelphia Eagle team's going to roll in this one, put up some points, and they definitely could finish in the top 1 to 3 range, I believe, in defensive rankings this week. And the next DST is the Pittsburgh Steelers, so the Steelers have a good matchup this week at the Texans. I know CJ Stroud's playing good football so far in the early going, but this is a young Texan team. Their O-line isn't all that great, and the Steelers defense, led by TJ Watt, is playing great football so far this season. In the first few games, week 1 versus the Niners, 30 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 2 versus Cleveland, a monster game, 22 points allowed, 6 sacks, and then 3 fumble recoveries, 2 pick sixes, including 1 to start the ball game. And then week 3 at the Vegas Raiders, they put Jimmy G through the ringer in that one. 18 points allowed, 4 sacks with a few big hits, 3 interceptions in that ball game. So this week here at the Texans, I know the Texans really haven't turned the football over that much. CJ Stroud, no interceptions, only 2 fumble losses in the early going. But Mike Tomlin always has this defensive ready. I think this week here they're going to have another good ball game as this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And they're definitely a defense I would start. The next one's the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs, starting this defense is clicking and things are starting to fall into place since Chris Jones returned in week 2 after his holdout. And they paid the man his money week 1 versus Detroit. Still a pretty solid performance in my opinion. 15 points allowed in the loss, a sack, a fumble recovery. Week 2 with Jacksonville, what a ball game. 9 points allowed, 4 sacks, a fumble recovery. And week 3 versus Chicago, 10 points allowed, 3 sacks and into, and a fumble recovery. So this week here, one of the best matchups you possibly could have for a defense is at the New York Jets that give up the 7th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. We know Zach Wilson's probably the worst quarterback starting in the league this season here. And this Jet team, they just don't move the ball. I know they got talented running back in Breece Hall and a talented wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, but Zach Wilson can't get the football down the field. He's holding on to it too much, and he's just looking for those short plays and playing scared out there and too conservative. So I think this Chief team, they're going to get off to their early 10, 14-point lead, make this Jet offense one-dimensional where they got no choice but to throw. And that's where I think this defense definitely tees off, so they're definitely a top 5 option this week. And a defense to start next to these Cincinnati Bengals. So the Bengals coming off a great performance, in my opinion, in terms of getting to Matthew Stafford and having him under duress. The whole ball game on Monday Night Football was Matthew Stafford. So the first few weeks here for Cincinnati, week 1 at the Bengals, 24 points allowed, 3 sacks and into a fumble recovery. Week 2 versus the Ravens, 27 points allowed, a kick return touchdown. And week 3 versus the Rams, 16 points allowed, and like I said, 6 sacks, 2 interceptions. So this week here, at pretty much a non-existent offense as well at the Tennessee Titans, even though on paper, that's a stacked offense. If you told me coming into the year, DeAndre Hopkins, Derrick Henry, Traylon Burks, Chigo Kongwo at tight end, but these guys aren't doing much. Offensive line is one of the worst in the league, so I think they could get a few sacks on him like they did to Matthew Stafford. And also, Ryan Tannehill is one of the worst starters in the league as well, holding on to the football too long, not being an accurate quarterback, not making good decisions. And this week here, I think the Cincinnati Bengal team gets home a few times in this one and has a good ball game. And the 5th and final defense, DST, I look to start the Los Angeles Chargers. I know this Charger defense isn't good, but this week is a matchup play versus the Vegas Raiders with Jimmy Garoppolo possibly not playing in this ball game in the concussion protocol right now. They definitely could tee you off as a 1-week use versus a weak offense with not that great of a line. And with Jimmy Garoppolo possibly being out, it could be a huge problem, obviously, for this Raider team. And last week versus similar offense in Minnesota, 24 points allowed, 4 sacks and into fumble recovery, so it wouldn't surprise me if we see something similar out of this Charger team, even if Jimmy Garoppolo plays, and he does have 6 interceptions already this season, which leads the league. So right now, as a streaming option, I like the Chargers this week, so that's a few defense DST units I look to start here in week 4 of the fantasy football season.